Hello and welcome. I'm Shanakshi Chakravarti, your host at Nuremberg Messe India. And if you've been following us, you know we've been speaking to industry leaders and experts talking to us about their respective work across different sectors, across different industries like the wood industry, the organic industry, the broadcast industry. Speaking of which, we are talking about Asia's infotainment and broadcasting show that will happen in Mumbai in the month of October, where the who's who of this industry and ecosystem will be on display. What will they really be displaying? They will be talking about the latest cutting-edge technology, innovation, equipments, and of course, a lot of people talking about the emerging trends in this industry. Joining me right now in one such very insightful conversation is an industry expert himself, Mr. Rachit Tiwary, who is the Chief of Strategy and Business Head at DeKoder Digital. We will be talking about all things broadcast and infotainment, but specifically the business of broadcasting. Mr. Rachit, thank you so much for taking the time out and for really taking through us this conversation behind the business of infotainment and broadcast. There's so much to talk about. Let's dive in. Can you start by telling us about DeKoder, the journey? How did it begin? How did it come into being? And a little bit about yourself, of course.
Yeah. As a lot of people already know, DeKoder has been started by NDTV co-founders Dr. Pranay Roy and Mr. Radhika Roy, right? And both of them are pretty much pioneers in broadcast journalism in the country. I specifically look after the business and strategy of DeKoder, and that's the max introduction I'm going to give about myself. But I'd rather spend a lot more time on about DeKoder, right? So just to give you a sense, we're probably India's one of the first AI-led content app and website. Now, our consumers obviously are across social medias as well. So social media also plays a very big role for us. So our users can also consume us on YouTube, Twitter, which is now X, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, majority of your social media platform, right? So, but just to give you a sense of how we started and what DeKoder is all about, right? So just put it simply, DeKoder is about decoding complex subjects, right? So that's how we originated. So we actually realized that there's a lot of complex subjects such as elections, climate change, tech, which are very difficult as subjects. So we said that, hey, how do we decode them into simple, beautiful content pieces, which is backed by data, right? So data started playing a very, very big role into what we want to do. I think that's pretty much what makes us stand apart, right? So we actually said that, look, what's happening in the content world and content distribution world is there are a lot of players both on broadcast side and on the digital and social media side that the content is coming from opinions, right? But there's almost a rarity of content being disseminated from data point. So we said that, hey, while a lot of players are talking about opinions and with a dash of data, there was a huge opportunity there for us to actually be like, hey, you know what? I think it should be the opposite. Play with data and then build a narrative around it, right? Then build the story around it, because data will always help you build trust. And I think that's pretty much what we did. We started with Lok Sabha elections. We launched it during that time. And yeah, it's touched with the response was fantastic. So looking forward to building a lot.
But speaking of your launch and speaking of DeKoder really come into being, there was obviously a soft launch, but everyone really got to know about DeKoder about a few months back during the elections. Take us through that. What was the response, the feedback, the traction? Give us some numbers.
Incredible growth first when we launched. So I think the app pretty much launched around April and early May, and we were pretty much getting ready for the Lok Sabha elections, right? So just to give you a few numbers, on June 4th, the election results date, just on our social platforms, we got about 7.5 million views and approximately around 50 million impressions in 24 hours.
That's over 70 lakhs.
Yeah.
Organically.
Organically.
That's incredible.
We did not do any marketing. We did not do any boosting of posts or nothing. We actually wanted to see, what happens when we actually organically put our content out there. And I think people really liked it, right? Because on election results, for a few hours on Twitter, we were the number one most watched live stream video.
Incredible.
On YouTube, if you compare us, so in comparison with legacy media, the viewership per hour on our YouTube page versus legacy media, we beat the legacy players as well.
Fantastic.
Along with even the new age digital content players who were doing live content on election results day, we were far ahead. And I think that's pretty much, it boils down to Dr. Roy's trust factor that he brings in and DeKoder as a platform brings in, along with just beautiful, simple storytelling, right? And I think that's what people really loved and really fortunate.
I'd like to also add, it also, I think, adds as a testament to the fact that people were eagerly waiting to see Dr. Roy and his team come back with a bang, and boy, have you all. Right, that's incredible. I'd like to move on by asking you that, of course, after the launch now, but it's also important to understand what really makes you stand out from, if I can use the word competitors already, or if I can just say with your contemporaries, what does it make, how does DeKoder really stand out in a market that appears to look very fragmented? So if you can talk to us about that.
Sure. So I think, as an organization, we pay a lot of importance on data. And I keep going back there because that's pretty much the core of DeKoder. That's what makes us stand out. And the idea really is that, hey, how do we find good quality data? How do we extrapolate good numbers from that quality of data? And from those numbers, how do you build a story, right? And I think that's what makes us pretty much stand apart from everybody else.
Right.
And I think people always felt that you take most of, and again, I'm not talking about competition because it's too early for us to even talk about like he's a competition or somebody else is a competition. But we were very confident that if the moment you talk about numbers, the moment you talk about data, the viewer always feels that, hey, you know what, I have learned something today, not on opinion, but I actually can go back and talk about numbers to somebody else.
Yeah.
I can talk about data to somebody else, right? So that builds trust. And that builds not just trust, but also them coming back to a platform again. And I think that's what we saw. We saw a good retention, and we saw a lot of good word of mouth for DeKoder, especially during launch.
Just reinforcing that trust factor, I think, is also the very core of DeKoder. And that's exactly what you're pointing out, that at the end of the day, you want your viewer to believe that this is fact-driven, this is data-driven, and that's how you trust us.
Correct. And when you put the data out there, then they automatically start trusting because they can see the data for themselves, right? And it's a lot more easier for them to comprehend what's going on when you put actually the data in front of them.
Right. How can we really talk about digital news and digital consumption of news without really talking about AI? Everyone's talking about AI. It is the talk of the town.
Right.
Some believe it is the future. That's debatable. But of course, AI is a core part of DeKoder Digital as well. So clearly, DeKoder wants to lead the way in content with the help of AI. Talk to us about that a little bit. Share some light.
Very exciting. So as an organization, we're very excited about AI, right? So at the same time, we understand that it's at a very nascent stage. But the interesting thing is it's also growing very fast, right? So one of the things that we actually, the question that we asked ourselves, right, was that how do we use AI to actually distribute content to a larger audience, right? So that means for us to explore, how do we use maybe large language models and then use that to build a single piece of content in multiple languages, right? So how cool would it be if somebody is sitting in remotest part of Punjab or remotest part of Tamil Nadu listening to a Dr. Roy show or watching Dr. Roy show in Tamil or in Punjabi with the same feel as what an English audience gets when they watch Dr. Roy in English, right? Now, it's different than voice dubbing and subtitling, because subtitling and dubbing does not give you the same feel. And the question that we're really asking ourselves is that, okay, fine, how do we give them the same experience as what an English audience get through large language models? So that's something that we are really, really bullish about, and we want users to experience that feature a lot more. The other thing, and I think this is very cool, we've started on our platform something called the opinion slider, right? So what that is you can pick a question and you can get multiple perspectives on that. So we give you an AI tool slider, and you can pretty much slide that question and get multiple perspectives. So what we're trying to do is that, hey, how do we use AI to give more empowerment to the user, so that the user can get multiple perspectives and then make an informed decision themselves about the subject. So let's say that you want to figure out that, hey, will Trump coming back to power in America for the elections, will that be good for India? So you can use that slider to actually get a negative response, a positive, and a neutral, and then make an informed decision. So that's what we want to do with an opinion slider. And there's so many more other things that we are dabbling with, and which we will hopefully roll out. But yeah, responsibly is the key. And I think that's something that we'll have to be very, very careful about, because it's still nascent, but we're very excited.
You're also, in a way, I think, empowering your viewer, right?
Exactly.
And that's not everybody's core idea of business.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. And I'm really looking forward to it personally as well. Talking about we were talking about this, the paradigm shift of how things were about 30-40 years ago. So about 30-40 years ago, when private news really was just coming into India, booming, the kind of tech that was being used with equipment, such big equipments, heavy, sweated off and everything. And now, of course, with the founding members of NDTV, the kind of tech that they used back then, and now when we have everything at the touch on a smartphone, and something as small as this, how is DeKoder really adapting to this new tech? And what is your vision with this new tech with DeKoder?
Great question, right? So I'll try and answer this. I'm not a tech person, but I'll try and answer the essence of your question, right? So again, if we go back 30-35 years, when content was still very expensive to produce, right? So there were not many players. When the bandwidth was low and the internet penetration was low, you saw limited players entering the content market, right? Because it was expensive to do. So you saw the big satellites, you saw the big OB vans with satellites on the vans going across, and you would look at that and be like, wow, what's happening? Thing, right?
And tapes
and things like that. They were just very larger than life kind of things. And that time they were still the gold standard, and editing at that time would have everything, and the technology was the best, right? Now what happened let's look at what's happening in the last 7, 8, 10 years, right?
Yeah.
The bandwidth prices have decreased. Prices of internet in general has decreased. Bandwidth has increased, and because of which more content players have come into play. Anybody who has a smartphone can produce content, right? So it's always become like a level playing field in terms of distribution of content, right? But what that has led to, what has led as a result of it is there has not been a standardized quality, right? So you will see sometimes low production quality also doing really well on social media. Sometimes a high quality production not doing that well on social media, on YouTube or Instagram. There's no standardized practice per se. People started consuming content from SDI to then HD, then from HDMI to now, which is NDI sort of a thing, which is NDI is it is the next phase of tech jump in production, but there has not been any any media house or content company in general that is an end-to-end NDI. DeKoder was the first company in India which is an end-to-end NDI. So just so the viewers understand what NDI is, it's pretty much like a single piece of wire which has connected everything. So all audio equipments, all cameras, the entire PCR, everything gets connected to one single wire, right? And why that is important is because the more the wires, the more the quality distortion, right? So video, the more the wires, the video quality decreases, audio quality decreases. With NDI end-to-end is that the quality remains constant. So even if you're doing a live broadcast, if you look at live broadcasts of news or live broadcasts of any on social media, the production quality decreases because it's live, right? And it's not end-to-end NDI. With NDI, you can almost get like a movie-like experience, right? And so for us at DeKoder, we are ready with that.
How exciting.
And again, people who were doing it with us, this was the first time they were also doing it, right? So we were all learning together. And that's the fun of it. That's the fun of it, of trying to stay ahead in technology than everybody else. So yeah, that should give you a sense of how we are trying to keep up with it. And I'm sure we'll learn a lot.
How exciting. Yeah. How truly exciting this is for DeKoder, DeKoder Digital, for you, for the team. One of the things we were talking about was the right time for digital content.
Correct.
Platform to grow exponentially. What does that mean, and how does DeKoder really sort of pave that way and plan to leverage this?
Right. So I'll try and decode this answer, pun intended. So look at what happened with television, number of houses in which television is present, right? Or number of television users. Let's say, what is the total number of television users in the country? In 2019, that number stood around close to 960 odd million. Between 2019 to 2023, the number decreased from 960 million to 845 million. So that means in 4 years, 115 million people moved out of television consumption.
Yeah.
In the same time period, look what happened to broadband, right? So broadband in 2019 was around 560 odd million. 2023, it's at around 945 million or somewhere around in that range, right? So while in the same time, when television consumers decreased by 115 million, your consumption on digital and broadband increased by 350 million, right? In the same time period. By 2028, the same numbers, television users are going to be around 600 odd million. That's what's projected. Versus broadband is at around 1.2 billion people. So it's going to be double than that, right? That's one. The second piece of the puzzle is connected TVs, right? So smart TVs or connected TVs, where people, as the old television phases out, probability is that you're getting a new smart TV into your household, right? And that's what's happening. The same number in 2021 was about 7 million people had connected or smart TVs, were using smart TVs. That number today stands at around 35 million, expected to be around 65, 70 million, probably more by 2028, right? So when you look at all of these data points, that how broadband numbers are increasing, consumption on that is increasing, you see connected TVs, where are people consuming content now, right? So you're not waiting to come back home and then sit in front of the TV and watching.
Which is what our parents, our family, fathers did.
Exactly. Now people are watching content, whether it's
while you're driving, while you're gymming.
While you're driving, while you're gymming, while you're in a car, while you're in a bus, while you're in an auto.
You have content right
everywhere, right? So you're not waiting to get home to watch content. And I think when you put all of these pieces of puzzles together, it's very difficult for you not to be bullish on the fact that this is probably the right time for you to enter and just grow exponentially. And I think that's what we probably... we are in that space at the right time. So it's for us now to leverage that and just, go full force with our content, because the trust is already there. The quality of content is there now. We just,
I must take a moment to also compliment you. You truly are the perfect business fit. You have the numbers right at the tip of your tongue, Rachit. compliments to
Thank
you for
you.
that.
I hope I got the numbers right.
But I think these numbers have to mean something to our audience, because I'm sure they don't know of the staggering difference of amount of increasing and decreasing in terms of consumption. TV has reduced, digital has increased. People really need to know about this, and I mean that's exciting. Let's now talk about, and I have to peep into my notes obviously because there's so much to talk about. We'll talk about the exciting content plans really in store for DeKoder, the road ahead, what's in store. Take us through that. I know you won't reveal too much, but you're the chief of strategy as well.
No, it's nothing. I mean, look, the good content always does well, no matter what you do. But yes, we have a lot of interesting content lined up. One thing is guaranteed, that anything that comes from DeKoder and anything that comes from Dr. Roy and Mrs. Roy, the quality will be gold standard, right? So that's 100% that has to happen. Will we dabble? I'll give you the categories that we are dabbling in.
Right.
Obviously, a bunch of elections are coming up. Maharashtra is coming up.
Yep.
You have Haryana coming up, Jammu and Kashmir coming up. So many elections coming. U.S. elections coming up. So we'll be there. We'll be there in elections for sure. Then a few global shows that we are planning, which are in pre-production right now. And that will be exciting because it's almost an iconic show that comes back. So that should give a hint to whoever understands what I'm saying. So yeah, a lot of exciting things, but great quality.
But speaking of trends then, content trends. So important to highlight about this. Do you always think that content trends come from views where either it's a series of comedy or someone mimicking each other, or like 10 people locked up in a house for a month? Is that what really brings the views? Is there a hack? Talk to us from a business point of view.
Look, it's very difficult to talk about these things, right? Because obviously trends and waves happen. So currently, if you see across OTT, you'll see very high intense dramas being produced across Amazon Prime, Netflix, so on Live, all the platforms, right? So very high intense drama, serious drama is the trend. But when that's happening, is it fair to assume that Stree 2, which is a comedy horror, does 550 crores? Is that an outlier? Is that an exception? Probably not, right? Because at the end of the day, my sense is that good quality content across categories will do well, right? And we've seen that time and again. Just to give you a sense, give you an example, when we launched DeKoder, one of the most beautiful shows that Dr. Roy did was actually, it's called On the Ground, the Puja Story.
I'm aware.
And viewers must go and watch it if they have not. When we published that, and it's just a simple story of this young girl and her grit, who lives in a village in Bihar, and it's just Dr. Roy having a conversation with her, right? And if you I can't tell you how many emails we got where people saw that story and said, thank you for sharing, or, how can we help? This is, it just moved us and it made us cry. And it just tells you that when you produce good quality content, it affects people. And when people connect with it, when people feel it, that's when you know that you're doing a good job and do well. So I think that's the key, right? That yes, trends happen, but at the same time, don't think that you have a great idea and it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna do well because the trends are against you.
But Rachit, as a subset, as a sub question, what really is good quality content? I mean, if there is a puja story, it resonates with audience like you and me. Real human stories, soft human stories. But then there is also, like I said, 10 people locked up in a house for a month, and the nation loves to watch
good
that
quality
as well.
of content.
But does that really define good quality?
Yeah. I'm no one to decide whether 10 people locked up in a house is good quality content or not. If it's not good quality content, it would probably not work, right? So my sense is that if it's good quality content, it's working. My sense, I'm looking at it very objectively.
Right.
That across categories, in reality, it's a great quality of content. In a documentary style, Puja Story is a great quality of content. In sports, IPL is a great content. So create categories. we can't be sitting here being judgy about, hey, this is great quality or that quality. We're saying that in my category, I have to make sure that I'm...
So it's about options being available to people. It's not just one kind of content, which was maybe the case 30 years ago. We didn't have something as a series of comedy shows or etc. But now we have so much different kinds of content that people can actually pick and choose. Whatever they resonate with is good quality for them. I think maybe somewhere that is where we
that makes sense.
Come down to, right? How does DeKoder really plan on engaging the younger audience, especially in a time when, you know, digital consumption is on the rise? Also, I would like to add to it, at a time when there is so much different kinds of news being spread in the name of news, information being talked about in the name of news. So how do you really plan on engaging the younger audience? I know DeKoder is doing something on that front as well.
Yeah, at the end of the day, so you have to just be very clear on your fundamentals, right? So where the first question is, hey, are the young consuming news or content of infotainment? Let's put it that way, current affairs. The answer is yes, they are consuming content on that, right? The next question is, where are they consuming the content? They are consuming it completely on digital platforms, right? So even in digital platforms, okay, they get a little further. Where are they consuming on digital? Okay, they're consuming it on Instagram, they're consuming it on Twitter, they're consuming it on YouTube. Okay, fine. What more? How are they consuming it there? The answer is, okay, they're consuming it even on Reels. They're even consuming the content on Shorts. And they're even consuming on a podcast while they're driving, right? So as DeKoder, it's my responsibility that if I want to reach out to them, I am available on these platforms, right? So I will not shy away from creating Shorts. I will not shy away from creating Reels or creating larger podcasts to reach out to them. But at the same time, we'll keep the originality of DeKoder in all of that. That even in my short, I'll be talking about data, right? I'll not shy away from it. Even in Reel or even in my podcast, we'll talk about how data and data-led stories. So that's unique to us, because if we keep doing what everybody else is doing, that will probably not be our USP. Our USP is data. So I'll still create a very interesting short, but it'll be data backed. So that's how we want to reach out to them. In fact, we have an entire section called Gen Z dedicated on our DeKoder app. And we have an entire team who's pretty much the Gen Z. So they keep feeding a lot of information to us. Very interestingly, again, going back to data, if I see my viewer age bracket, 41% on our social platforms, 41% of our viewers are in the age bracket of 18 to 34.
You were able to decode that as well?
We decoded that one, right? So I think we're on the right track. I would love for that number to also increase, but that just shows that even newer audiences, younger audiences are finding us and they're consuming and they're sharing that content.
Fabulous. Last couple of questions, Rachit, would love to chat more, and I'm sure we will continue our association. But let's talk about global now. Let's go global. What is the future? What do you think of the global markets? How are you planning on tapping into that? Talk to us a little.
Early stages for us, to be very honest. We do definitely have plans to go to global. Why wouldn't?
Of course,
right? But again, I think we definitely want to focus on we want to focus on the fundamentals. Build our audience base here, and leverage our in general resonance that we have with the diaspora, right? So one of the big things that we do have in mind is that, hey, a large number of our audience who know us already, they're from the US, UK, Australia, Middle East, and Europe, right? So and because of that, we are, again, as I said, we are producing a global show, keeping global markets in mind. So we're producing a show today, like it's still planning stages right now, which is a global show for the world, right, from India. And I think that's one way that we want to talk to the rest of the world as well. But again, I think we'll keep our feet on the ground and, one step at a time.
One step at a time. You will decode one step at a time. That's excellent. My last question to you, Rachit, is how does a platform like ABIS, which is what we're talking about, the broadcasting and infotainment industry and the show that we look forward to welcoming you in Bombay, but how does the platform like this really help businesses and entrepreneurs like yourself and DeKoder?
See, immensely, right? Because I think especially for young digital platforms, and I'm not just talking about DeKoder, and this is probably to every digital content or broadcasting company, if I can call it so. Where do you learn, right? You learn when you get exposure, right? And what's happening in tech. What's the latest innovation that's happening in broadcast, right? How you get that exposure, right? If you want, because only when you get those exposure, you'll be able to build on that, right? If you have a great idea, you don't know how to execute it. The moment I go to a platform like Avis and I see an innovation, which is the last piece of my puzzle, I know exactly how to use that innovation for better content, right? And I think that's what a platform like Avis does, right? Earlier, even if I don't have, sometimes earlier you would have to go outside India to a lot of these international exhibitions again, which are not cheap, right? So if you're a young platform, I highly suggest a platform like Avis works, right? You go, you meet different people, you get exposed to different innovations, and also industry experts, right? So when there are a lot of industry leaders, you just learn, right? So if not for anything, be there to learn.
All right. So that was very, very insightful, Rachit. Thank you so much for taking us through all things business, all things infotainment and broadcast. This has been so insightful with you, especially for our audience who is always wanting to learn more, and for our audience who wants to know more about DeKoder Digital. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was great to be here.